famous in Western movies. It looks similar to any other type of revolver with a few exceptions. Notice that the trigger is very close to the rear of the trigger guard. This is because the trigger performs only one action, to drop the hammer. Hence the name, single action. To fire this gun, you pull the hammer back to the cocked position with your thumb. Then, aim the gun at your intended target and engage the trigger with a very slight pressure. The hammer will fall, and the gun will fire. To shoot again, you must pull the hammer back once again. This advances the cylinder to the next chamber, which holds a new cartridge, and then again you pull the trigger. This is the Casull 454 single action revolver. Now to load this gun, first you want to open the loading gate, which is usually located here on the right side. You can do that with your thumb. This gives you access to the chambers. Now, to revolve the cylinder, first you must half-cock the hammer, and you'll hear this on the first click. This allows you to rotate the cylinder, which gives access to each one of the chambers. To load, simply take your cartridge and drop it into each cylinder, and then you advance to the next one, another cartridge, next chamber, and finally the fourth chamber. Then you would close the loading gate, and this is where you're going to be very careful. Get a firm grip on the pistol, thumb on the hammer, cock it all the way back, and then hold on strong and release the trigger and slowly let the hammer down onto the firing pin. Now, the gun is loaded, so you always, of course, want to keep it pointed in a safe direction. To unload, you just reverse the procedure. Open the loading gate, half-cock the hammer, you hear that click, advance to the first chamber, and then you use the extraction rod. And the extraction rod is spring activated. You can use your index finger, and you pull back on it, and it pushes the round right out of the chamber. Then you advance to the next chamber. Once again. And for our last round with the extraction rod. And you'll see a good shot of the extraction rod here as it came up all the way through the chamber. Now, single action revolvers are slightly more difficult and slower to use than double action revolvers. However, with practice, you can become very proficient in their use as
The double-action revolver is named so because one trigger pull performs two distinctive actions. As you pull the trigger, the action rotates the cylinder, and as you pull the trigger further, it drops the hammer. There is no need to cock the hammer with your thumb. It is cocked by the first action of the trigger, and the second action causes the hammer to fall, which in turn fires the gun. Most double-action revolvers can be fired single-action style by cocking the hammer back all the way and then squeezing the trigger. The double-action revolver is the preferred gun for beginning shooters and basic self-defense. You will notice there is usually not a safety on revolvers because of the action needed to cock the hammer. Double-action revolvers are very easy to operate and to fire multiple shots. Most modern revolvers are infallible, and if kept in good condition, they may never break and could even last a lifetime. To load the double-action revolver, simply drop one cartridge into each chamber and then close the cylinder. The handgun is now ready to fire.
Now, in loading a double-action revolver, it's extremely important that you follow the basic rule of safety, either loading or unloading. Always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. And that way, no matter what happens, you won't have any bad accidents. Once again, keep that muzzle pointed downrange as you close the cylinder. Now, there's 3 different ways to pull the trigger on this double-action gun. You can do a continuous, smooth trigger pull and kind of just let it roll straight back and surprise you. The key here is to pull straight back, not to yank the gun one way or the other with too much pressure that way or too much pressure this way. The key, once again, is to roll straight back. Now, another way to shoot this gun, and this has happened a lot in competition, is to stage the trigger. There's really 2 different functions here. One is to rotate the cylinder to the next chamber, and the next function of the trigger is to drop the hammer. So I'll stage the trigger, pull back, and pause. Now all you have is just a little bit more pressure to drop the hammer. This is called staging the trigger. Pull back and stop, and pull. And you can be very accurate that way because you're not pulling the sights off with the trigger pull. The last way is to thumb cock the hammer, much like a single action revolver. Back all the way. Now there's a very slight pressure to drop the hammer. And that's the thumb cocking method. Either way, they're all very accurate, and it's basically a personal preference and depending upon what you're doing with the gun at that time.
There are many different makes and models of revolvers, and they each have their advantages and disadvantages depending on their intended use. There are large revolvers and small revolvers. Some are meant for hunting. Some are designed for target and competition shooting, while others are intended to be carried for long periods of time in a concealed position. If you are purchasing a handgun for self-defense, we have several suggestions. First, make sure that you are buying a gun of high quality. Purchase a handgun from one of the major manufacturers, Smith & Wesson, Colt, Taurus, and Ruger, to name a few. There are many top-quality revolvers available. Second, buy a gun that feels good in your hand. Not too big, not too small. Smith & Wesson is now making revolvers designed specifically for women, with a smaller grip and lighter overall weight. For self-defense, we recommend that you use a revolver that has a 2 or 4-inch barrel length. It will be lighter and easier to bring into action than a longer pistol. And finally, purchase a handgun in a suitable caliber. Whether for hunting, target shooting, or self-defense, there is a correct caliber that will help you maximize your efforts. Now let's take a look at semi-automatic pistols.
The semi-automatic pistol is a much more complicated handgun than a revolver. There are many moving parts and springs to keep it functioning properly, and it takes more strength and skill to shoot semi-automatic pistols. The semi-automatic pistol is called semi-automatic because of its ability to automatically cycle a new round into the chamber after a shot is fired. There are 5 major parts to this firearm: the barrel, the frame, the slide, the trigger group, and the magazine. The magazine holds the ammunition, and depending on the make and model of the handgun, it can hold 5 to 15 rounds or even more. Semi-automatic pistols are available in many different calibers, and like revolvers, are available in single action and double action. First, let's examine a single action semi-automatic pistol.
The first thing you must do when